The Young Visitors or Mr. Salteena's Plan **** Picture of the author. The Young Visitors or Mr. Salteena's Plan by Daisy Ashford with a preface by J. M. Barrie. New York: George H. Doran Company. Published, 1919. By George H. Doran Company. Printed in the United States of America. PGV. Preface. Go to Table of Contents. The owner of the copyright guarantees that The Young Visitors is the unaided effort in fiction of an authoress of 9 years. Effort, however, is an absurd word to use, as you may see by studying the triumphant countenance of the child herself, which is here reproduced as frontispiece to her sublime work. This is no portrait of a writer who had to burn the oil at midnight. Indeed, there is documentary evidence that she was hauled off to bed every evening at 6. It has an air of careless power. There is a complacency about it that by the severe might perhaps be called smugness. It needed no effort for that face to knock off a masterpiece. It probably represents precisely how she looked when she finished a chapter. When she was actually at work, pg 6, I think the expression was more solemn, with the tongue firmly clenched between the teeth, an unholy rapture showing as she drew near her love chapter. Fellow craftsmen will see that she is looking forward to this chapter all the time. The manuscript is in pencil in a stout little notebook, 2d, and there it has lain for years, for though the authoress was 9 when she wrote it, she is now a grown woman. It has lain, in lavender as it were, in the dumpy notebook, waiting for a publisher to ride that way and rescue it, and here he is at last, not a bit afraid that to this age it may appear Victorian. Indeed, if its pictures of high life are accurate, as we cannot doubt, the authoress seems always so sure of her facts. They had a way of going on in those times which is really surprising. Even the grand historical figures were free and easy, such as King Edward, of whom we have perhaps the most human picture ever penned, as he appears at a levee rather sumptuously in pg 7, a small but costly crown, and afterwards slips away to tuck into ices. It would seem in particular that we are oddly wrong in our idea of the young Victorian lady as a person more shy and shrinking than the girl of today. The Ethel of this story is a fascinating creature who would have a good time wherever there were a few males, but no longer could she voyage through life quite so jollily without attracting the attention of the censorious. Chaperone seems to be one of the very few good words of which our authoress had never heard. The lady she had grown into, the owner of the copyright already referred to, gives me a few particulars of this child she used to be, and is evidently a little scared by her. We should probably all be a little scared, though proud, if that portrait was dumped down in front of us as ours, and we were asked to explain why we once thought so much of ourselves as that. Except for the smirk on her face, all I can learn of her now is that, pg 8, she was one of a small family who lived in the country, invented their own games, dodged the governess and let the rest of the world go hang. She read everything that came her way, including, as the context amply proves, the grown-up novels of the period. I adored writing and used to pray for bad weather, so that I need not go out but could stay in and write. Her mother used to have early tea in bed, Sometimes visitors came to the house, when there was talk of events in high society. There was mention of places called Hampton Court, the Gaiety Theatre and the Crystal Palace. This is almost all that is now remembered, but it was enough for the blazing child. She sucked her thumb for a moment, this is guesswork, and sat down to her amazing tale. Her mother used to have early tea in bed. Many authors must have had a similar experience, but they all missed the possibilities of it until this young woman came along. It thrilled her, and tea in PG-9 bed at last takes its proper place in fiction. Mr. Salteena woke up rather early next day and was delighted to find Horace the footman entering with a cup of tea. "Oh, thank you, my man," said Mr. Salteena, rolling over in the costly bed. "Mr. Clark is nearly out of the bath, sir," announced Horace. "I will have great pleasure in turning it on for you if such is your desire." "Well, yes, you might," said Mr. Salteena, seeing it was the idea. Mr. Salteena cleverly conceals his emotion, but as soon as he is alone he rushes to Ethel's door. "I say," said Mr. Salteena excitedly, "I have had some tea in bed." Sometimes visitors came to the house. Nothing much in that to us, but how consummately this child must have studied them, if you consider what she knew of them before the vehicle arrived to take them back to the station. You will never dare to spend another weekend in a house where there may be a novelist of 9 years. I am sure that when you left your bedroom this child stole in, examined everything, PGX, and summed you up. She was particularly curious about the articles on your dressing table, including the little box containing a reddish powder, and she never desisted from watching you till she caught you dabbing it on your cheeks. This powder, which she spells rich, went a little to her head, and it accompanies Ethel on her travels with superb effect. For instance, she is careful to put it on to be proposed to, and again its first appearance is excused in words that should henceforth be serviceable in every boudoir. "I shall put some red rouge on my face," said Ethel, "because I am very pale owing to the drains in this house." Those who read will see how the rooms in Hampton Court became the compartments in the Crystal Palace, and how the Gaiety Hotel grew out of the Gaiety Theatre, with many other agreeable changes. The novelist will find the tale a model for his future work. How incomparably, for instance, the authoress dives, PG-11, into her story at once. How cunningly throughout she keeps us on the hooks of suspense, jumping to Mr. Salteena when we are in a quiver about Ethel, and turning to Ethel when we are quite uneasy about Mr. Salteena. This authoress of 9 is flirting with her readers all the time. Her mind is such a rich pocket that as she digs in it, her head to the side and her tongue well out, she sends up showers of nuggets. There seldom probably was a novelist with such an uncanny knowledge of his characters as she has of Mr. Salteena. The first line of the tale etches him for all time. Mr. Salteena was an elderly man of 42 and fond of asking people to stay with him. On the next page Salteena draws a touching picture of himself in a letter accepting an invitation. "I do hope I shall enjoy myself with you. I am fond of digging in the garden and I am partial to ladies if they are nice. I suppose it is my nature. I am not quite a gentleman, but you would hardly notice it, but can't be helped anyhow. PG-12. When the great morning arrived, Mr. Salteena did not have an egg for his breakfast in case he should be sick on the journey. For my part, I love Mr. Salteena, who has a touch of Hamlet, and I wished up to the end that Ethel would make him happy, though I never had much hope after I read the description of Bernard Clark's legs. It is not to be wondered at that Mr. Salteena soon grew rather jealous of Bernard, who showed off from the first. My own room is next the bathroom, said Bernard. It is decorated dark red, as I have summer tastes. The bathroom has got a tip-up basin. Thus was Mr. Salteena put in his place, and there the cruel authoress, with her tongue farther out than ever, doggedly keeps him. After dinner Ethel played some merry tunes on the piano, and Bernard responded with a rather loud song in a bass voice, and Ethel clapped him a good deal. Then Mr. Salteena asked a few riddles, as he was not musical. No wonder Mr. Salteena went gloomily to bed, not to PG-13, sleep, but to think out the greater riddle of how to become a gentleman, with which triumphant adventure the book is largely concerned. To many the most instructive part of the story will be the chapter entitled Bernard's Idea. Bernard's idea, warmly acclaimed by Ethel, is that she and he should go up to London for a few weeks' gaiety. Something of the kind has often been done in fiction and in guidebooks, but never probably in such a hearty way as here. Arrived at the Gaiety Hotel, Bernard pokes his head into the window of the paid desk. "Have you a couple of bedrooms for self and young lady?" he enquired in a lordly way. He is told that they have two beauties. "Thank you," said Bernard, "we will go up if you have no objection." "None whatever, sir," said the genial lady. "The beds are well aired and the view quite pleasant." "Come along, Ethel," cried Bernard. "This sounds all right, eh?" "Oh, quite," said Ethel with a beaming smile. He decides gallantly, PG-14, that the larger room shall be hers. "I shall be quite lost in that large bed," Ethel says. "Yes, I expect you will," said Bernard. "And now what about a little table d'hôte followed by a theatre?" Bernard's proposal should be carried in the pocket of all future swains. He decides whilst imbibing his morning tea beneath the pink silken quilt that to propose in London would not be the correct idea. He springs out of bed and knocks at Ethel's door. "Are you up, my dear?" he called. "Well, not quite," said Ethel, hastily jumping from her downy nest. He explains his idea. "Oh, hurrah!" shouted Ethel, "I shall soon be ready, as I had my bath last night, so won't wash very much now." They go up the river in a boat, and after they had eaten and drunk deeply of the charming viands ending up with meringues and chocolates, Bernard says in a passionate voice, "Let us now bask under the spreading trees." "Oh yes, let's," said Ethel. "Ethel," he murmured in a trembly voice. PG-15, "Oh, what is it?" said Ethel. What it was, as well she knew, was love eternal. Ethel accepts him, faints, and is brought back to life by a clever idea of Bernard's, who pours water on her. She soon came to and looked up with a sickly smile. "Take me back to the Gaiety Hotel," she whispered faintly. "With pleasure, my darling," said Bernard. "I will just pack up our viands ere I unloose the boat." Ethel felt better after a few drops of champagne and began to tidy her hair while Bernard packed the remains of the food. Then arm in arm they tottered to the boat. "I trust you have not got an illness, my darling," murmured Bernard as he helped her in. "Oh no, I am very strong," said Ethel. "I fainted from joy," she added to explain matters. "Oh, I see," said Bernard, handing her a cushion. "Well, some people do," he added kindly. "So I will end my chapter," the authoress says, and we can picture her doing it complacently, and slowly pulling in her tongue. Ethel was married in the Abbey. Her PG-16 wedding dress was a rich satin with a humped pattern of gold on the pure white, and it had a long train edged with arum lilies. "You will indeed be a charming spectacle, my darling," gasped Bernard as they left the shop, and I have no doubt she was. She got many delightful presents, the nicest of all being from her father, who provided a check for £2 and promised to send her a darling little baby calf when ready. This is perhaps the prettiest touch in the story and should make us all take off our hats to the innocent wondering mind that thought of it. Poor Mr. Salteena. He was at the wedding, dressed in black and crying into his handkerchief. However, he recovered to an extent and married another and had 10 children, 5 of each, none of them of course equal to Ethel's children, of whom in a remarkably short time there were 7, which the authoress evidently considers to be the right idea. It seems to me to be a remarkable work, PG-17, for a child, remarkable even in its length and completeness, for when children turn author they usually stop in the middle, like the kitten when it jumps. The penciled MS has been accurately reproduced, not a word added or cut out. Each chapter being in one long paragraph, however, this has been subdivided for the reader's comfort. J. M. Barrie. PG-19. Contents Chapter Page Preface V1 Quite a Young Girl 23-2 Starting Gaily 27-3 The First Evening 36-4 Mr. Salteena's Plan 41-5 The Crystal Palace 45-6 High Life 59-7 Bernard's Idea 74-8 AM Gay Call 79-9 AM Proposal 88-10 Preparing for the Fray 95-11 The Wedding 99-12 How It Ended 102, PG-23, The Young Visitors Chapter 1 Quite a Young Girl. Go to Table of Contents. Mr. Salteena was an elderly man of 42 and was fond of asking people to stay with him. He had quite a young girl staying with him of 17 named Ethel Montague. Mr. Salteena had dark short hair and mustache and whiskers which were very black and twisty. He was middle-sized and he had very pale blue eyes. He had a pale brown suit, but on Sundays he had a black one, and he had a topper every day as he thought it more becoming. Ethel Montague had fair hair done on the top and blue eyes. She had a blue velvet frock which had grown rather short in the sleeves. She had a black straw hat and kid gloves. PG-24. One morning Mr. Salteena came down to breakfast and found Ethel had come down first, which was strange. "Is the tea made, Ethel?" he said, rubbing his hands. "Yes," said Ethel, "and such a queer-shaped parcel has come for you." "Yes, indeed, it was a queer-shaped parcel. It was a hat box tied down very tight and a letter stuffed between the string." "Well, well," said Mr. Salteena, "parcels do turn queer. I will read the letter first." And so saying he tore open the letter, and this is what it said: "My dear Alfred, I want you to come for a stop with me, so I have sent you a top hat wrapped up in tissue paper inside the box. Will you wear it staying with me, because it is very uncommon? Please bring one of your young ladies, whichever is the prettiest in the face. I remain yours truly, Bernard Clark. PG 25. "Well," said Mr. Salteena, "I shall take you to stay, Ethel, and fancy him sending me a top hat." Then Mr. S. opened the box, and there lay the most splendid top hat of a lovely rich tone, rather like grapes, with a ribbon round complete. "Well," said Mr. Salteena peevishly, "I don't know if I shall like it. The bow of the ribbon is too flighty for my age." Then he sat down and ate the egg which Ethel had so kindly laid for him. After he had finished his meal, he got down and began to write to Bernard Clark. He ran upstairs on his fat legs and took out his blotter with a loud sniff, and this is what he wrote: "My dear Bernard, certainly I shall come and stay with you next Monday. I will bring Ethel Montague, commonly called Miss M. She is very active and pretty. I do hope I shall enjoy myself with you. I am fond of digging in the garden, and I am partial to ladies if, PG 26, they are nice. I suppose it is my nature. I am not quite a gentleman, but you would hardly notice it, but can't be helped anyhow. We will come by the 3 to 15. Your old and valued friend, Alfred Salteena." Perhaps my readers will be wondering why Bernard Clark had asked Mr. Salteena to stay with him. He was a lonely man in a remote spot, and he liked people and parties, but he did not know many. "What rot," muttered Bernard Clark as he read Mr. Salteena's letter. He was rather a presumptuous man. First page of original manuscript. The first page of the original manuscript, PG 27, Chapter 2. Starting gaily, go to table of contents. When the great morning came, Mr. Salteena did not have an egg for his breakfast in case he should be sick on the journey. "What top hat will you wear?" asked Ethel. "I shall wear my best black and my white alpaca coat to keep off the dust and flies," replied Mr. Salteena. "I shall put some red rouge on my face," said Ethel, "because I am very pale owing to the drains in this house." "You will look very silly," said Mr. Salteena with a dry laugh. "Well, so will you," said Ethel in a snappy tone, and she ran out of the room with a very superior run, throwing out her legs behind and her arms swinging in rhythm. PG 28. "Well," said the owner of the house, "she has a most idiotic run." Presently Ethel came back in her best hat and a lovely velvet coat of royal blue. "Do I look nice in my get-up?" she asked. Mr. Salteena surveyed her. "You look rather rash, my dear. Your colors don't quite match your face, but never mind, I am just going up to say goodbye to Rosalind, the housemaid." "Well, don't be long," said Ethel. Mr. S. skipped upstairs to Rosalind's room. "Goodbye, Rosalind," he said. "I shall be back soon, and I hope I shall enjoy myself." "I make no doubt of that, sir," said Rosalind with a blush as Mr. Salteena silently put 2/6 on the dirty toilet cover. "Take care of your bronchitis," said Mr. S. rather bashfully, and he hastily left the room, waving his hand carelessly to the housemaid. "Come along," cried Ethel, powdering her nose in the hall. "Let us get into the cab." Mr. PG 29, Salteena did not care for powder, but he was an unselfish man, so he dashed into the cab. "Sit down," said Ethel as the cabman waved his whip. "You are standing on my luggage." "Well, I am paying for the cab," said Mr. S., "so I might be allowed to put my feet where I like." They travelled second class in the train, and Ethel was longing to go first, but thought perhaps least said soonest mended. Mr. Salteena got very excited in the train about his visit. Ethel was calm, but she felt excited inside. "Bernard has a big house," said Mr. S., gazing at Ethel. "He is inclined to be rich." "Oh, indeed," said Ethel, looking at some cows flashing past the window. Mr. S. felt rather disheartened, so he read the paper till the train stopped and the porters shouted "Racamere Station." "We had better collect our traps," said Mr. Salteena, and just then a very exalted footman in a cocked hat and olive green uniform put his head in at PG 30. The window. "Are you for Racamere Hall?" he said in impressive tones. "Well, yes, I am," said Mr. Salteena, "and so is this lady." "Very good, sir," said the noble footman. "If you will alight, I will see to your luggage. There is a conveyance awaiting you." "Oh, thank you," said Mr. S., and he and Ethel stepped along the platform. Outside they found a lovely carriage lined with olive green cushion to match the footman, and the horses had green bridles and bows on their manes and tails. They got gingerly in. "Will he bring our luggage?" asked Ethel nervously. "I expect so," said Mr. Salteena, lighting a very long cigar. "Do we tip him?" asked Ethel quietly. "Well, no, I don't think so, not yet. We had better just thank him politely." Just then the footman staggered out with the baggage. Ethel bowed gracefully over the door of the carriage, and Mr. S. waved his PG 31 hand as each bit of luggage was hoisted up to make sure it was all there. Then he said, "Thank you, my good fellow," very politely. "Not at all, sir," said the footman, and touching his cocked hat he jumped actively to the box. "I was right not to tip him," whispered Mr. Salteena. "The thing to do is to leave 2/6 on your dressing table when your stay is over." "Does he find it?" asked Ethel, who did not really know at all how to go on at a visit. "I believe so," replied Mr. Salteena. "Anyhow, it is quite the custom, and we can't help it if he does not. Now, my dear, what do you think of the scenery?" "Very nice," said Ethel, gazing at the rich fur rug on her knees. Just then the carriage rolled into a beautiful drive with tall trees and big red flowers growing amid shiny dark leaves. Presently the haughty coachman pulled up with a great clatter at a huge front door with tall pillars each side, a big iron bell and two very clean scrapers. The doors flung open as if by magic, causing PG 32 Ethel to jump, and a portly butler appeared on the scene with a very shiny shirt front and a huge pale face. "Welcome, sir," he exclaimed good-naturedly as Mr. Salteena alighted rather quickly from the vehicle and pleased to step inside. Mr. Salteena stepped in as bid, followed by Ethel. The footman again struggled with the luggage and the butler, Francis Minute by name, kindly lent a hand. The hall was very big and hung round with guns and mate and ancestors, giving it a gloomy but a grand air. The butler then showed them down a winding corridor till he came to a door which he flung open, shouting, "Mr. Salteena and a lady, sir." A tall man of 29 rose from the sofa. He was rather bent in the middle, with very nice long legs, fairish hair and blue eyes. "Hullo, Alf, old boy," he cried, "so you have got here all safe and no limbs broken?" "None, thank you, Bernard," replied Mr. Salteena, shaking hands. "And let me introduce PG 33, Miss Montague. She is very pleased to come for this visit." "Oh yes," gasped Ethel, blushing through her red rouge. Bernard looked at her keenly and turned a dark red. "I am glad to see you," he said. "I hope you will enjoy it, but I have not arranged any parties yet, as I don't know anybody." "Don't worry," murmured Ethel, "I don't mix much in society," and she gave him a dainty smile. "I expect you would like some tea," said Bernard. "I will ring." "Yes, indeed we should," said Mr. Salteena eagerly. Bernard pealed on the bell and the butler came in with a stately walk. "Tea, please, Minute," cried Bernard Clark. "With pleasure, sir," replied Minute with a deep bow. A glorious tea then came in on a gold tray, 2 kinds of bread and butter, a lovely jam roll and lots of sugar cakes. Ethel's eyes began to sparkle and she made several remarks during the meal. "I expect, PG 34, you would now like to unpack," said Bernard when it was over. "Well yes, that is rather an idea," said Mr. Salteena. "I have given the best spare room to Miss Montague," said Bernard with a gallant bow, "and yours," turning to Mr. Salteena, "opens out of it, so you will be nice and friendly. Both the rooms have big windows and a handsome view." "How charming," said Ethel. "Yes, well, let us go up," replied Bernard, and he led the way up many a winding stairway till they came to an oak door with some lovely swans and bulrushes painted on it. "Here we are," he cried gaily. Ethel's room was indeed a handsome compartment with purple silk curtains and a 4-post bed draped with the same shade. The toilette set was white and mauve, and there were some violets in a costly vase. "Oh, I say," cried Ethel in surprise. "I am glad you like it," said Bernard, "and here we have yours, Alf." He opened, PG 35, the dividing doors and portrayed a smaller but dainty room, all in pale yellow and wild primroses. "My own room is next the bathroom," said Bernard. "It is decorated dark red, as I have summer tastes. The bathroom has got a tip-up basin and a hose thing for washing your head." "A good notion," said Mr. Salteena, who was secretly getting jealous. "Here we will leave our friends to unpack and end this chapter." PG 36. Chapter 3. The first evening. Go to table of contents. When they had unpacked, Mr. Salteena and Ethel went downstairs to dinner. Mr. Salteena had put on a complete evening suit, as he thought it was the correct idea, and some ruby studs he had got at a sale. Ethel had on a dress of yellow silk covered with tulle which was quite in the fashion, and she had on a necklace which Mr. Salteena gave her for a birthday present. She looked very becoming and pretty, and Bernard heaved a sigh as he gave her his arm to go into dinner. The butler Minute was quite ready for the fray, standing up very stiff and surrounded by 2 footmen in green plush and curly white wigs who were called Charles and Horace. "Well," said Mr. Salteena, lapping up his PG-37 turtle soup, "you have a very sumptuous house, Bernard." His friend gave a weary smile and swallowed a few drops of sherry wine. "It is fairly decent," he replied with a bashful glance at Ethel. "After our repast I will show you over the premises." "Many thanks," said Mr. Salteena, getting rather flustered with his forks. "You are to give a ball," remarked Ethel. "You have such large compartments." "Yes, there is room enough," sighed Bernard. "We might try a few steps, and meanwhile I might get to know a few people." "So you might," responded Ethel, giving him a speaking look. Mr. Salteena was growing a little peevish, but he cheered up when the port wine came on the table and the butler put round some costly finger bowls. He did not have any in his own house, and he followed Bernard Clark's advice as to what to do with them. After dinner Ethel played some PG-38 merry tunes on the piano, and Bernard responded with a rather loud song in a bass voice, and Ethel clapped him a good deal. Then Mr. Salteena asked a few riddles, as he was not musical. Then Bernard said, "Shall I show you over my domain?" and they strolled into the gloomy hall. "I see you have a lot of ancestors," said Mr. Salteena in a jealous tone. "Who are they?" "Well," said Bernard, "they are all quite correct. This is my Aunt Caroline. She was rather eccentric and quite old." "So I see," said Mr. Salteena, and he passed on to a lady with a very tight waist and queerly shaped. "That is Mary Ann Fudge, my grandmother, I think," said Bernard. "She was very well known in her day." "Why?" asked Ethel, who was rather curious by nature. "Well, I don't quite know," said Bernard, "but she was," and he moved away to the next picture. It was of a man with a fat smiley face and a red ribbon round him and a lot PG-39 of medals. "My great-uncle Ambrose Fudge," said Bernard carelessly. "He looks as our ancestor," said Ethel kindly. "Well, he was," said Bernard in a proud tone. "He was really the sinister son of Queen Victoria." "Not really," cried Ethel in excited tones. "But what does that mean?" "Well, I don't quite know," said Bernard Clark. "It puzzles me very much, but ancestors do turn queer at times." "Perhaps it means godson," said Mr. Salteena in an intelligent voice. "Well, I don't think so," said Bernard, "but I mean to find out." "It is very grand anyhow," said Ethel. "It is that," replied her host genially. "Who is this?" said Mr. Salteena, halting at a picture of a lady holding up some grapes and smiling a good deal. "Her name was called Minnie Pilato," responded Bernard. "She was rather far back, PG-40. But a real relation, and she was engaged to the Earl of Tullyvarden, only it did not quite come off." "What a pity," cried Ethel. "Yes, it was rather," replied Bernard, "but she married a captain in the navy and had 7 children, so she was quite all right." Here Mr. Salteena thought he had better go to bed, as he had had a long journey. Bernard always had a few prayers in the hall and some whiskey afterwards, as he was rather pious, but Mr. Salteena was not very addicted to prayers, so he marched up to bed. Ethel stayed as she thought it would be a good thing. The butler came in, as he was a very holy man, and Bernard piously said the Our Father and a very good HYMM called I will keep my anger down and a decade of the Rosary. Ethel chimed in quietly, and Frances Minute was most devout, and Ethel thought what a good holy family she was stopping with. So I will end my chapter. PG 41. Chapter 4 Mr. Salteena's Plan. Go to table of contents. Mr. Salteena woke up rather early next day and was surprised and delighted to find Horace the footman entering with a cup of tea. "Oh, thank you, my man," said Mr. Salteena, rolling over in the costly bed. "Mr. Clark is nearly out of the bath, sir," announced Horace. "I will have great pleasure in turning it on for you if such is your desire." "Well, yes, you might," said Mr. Salteena, seeing it was the idea, and Horace gave a profound bow. "Ethel, are you getting up?" shouted Mr. Salteena. "Very nearly," replied Ethel faintly from the next room. "I say," said Mr. Salteena excitedly, "I have had some tea in bed." PG 42, "So have I," replied Ethel. Then Mr. Salteena got into a mauve dressing gown with yellow tassels, and seizing his soap he wandered off to the bathroom, which was most sumptuous. It had a lovely white shiny bath and sparkling taps and several towels arrayed in readiness by doubtful Horace. It also had a step for climbing up the bath and other good dodges of a rich nature. Mr. Salteena washed himself well and felt very much better. After breakfast Mr. Salteena asked Bernard if he could have some private conversation with him. "Well, yes," replied Bernard, "if you will come into my study we can have a few words." "Can't I come too?" muttered Ethel sulkily. "No, my dear," said Mr. Salteena, "this is private." "Perhaps later I might have a private chat with you, Miss Montague," said Bernard kindly. "Oh, do let's," said Ethel. PG 43. Then Bernard and Mr. S strolled to the study and sat upon two armchairs. "Fire away," said Bernard, lighting his pipe. "Well, I can't exactly do that," said Mr. Salteena in slow tones. "It is a serious matter, and you can advise me, as you are a thrift gentleman, I am sure." "Well, yes," said Bernard. "What can I do for you, Alf?" "You can help me perhaps to be more like a gentleman," said Mr. Salteena, getting rather hot. "I am quite all right, as they say, but I would like to be the real thing. Can it be done?" he added, slapping his knees. "I don't quite know," said Bernard. "It might take a good time." "Might it?" said Mr. S. "But I would slave for years if need be." Bernard scratched his head. "Why don't you try the Crystal Palace?" he asked. "Several people, earls and even dukes, have private compartments there." "But I am not an earl," said Mr. Salteena in a perplexed tone. PG 44. "True," replied Bernard, "but I understand there are sort of students there who want to get into the War Office and notable banks." "Would that be a help?" asked Mr. Salteena eagerly. "Well, it might," said Bernard. "I can give you a letter to my old pal the Earl of Clincham, who lives there. He might rub you up, and by mixing with him you would probably grow more seemly." "Oh, 10,000 thanks," said Mr. Salteena. "I will go there as soon as it can be arranged if you would be so kind as to keep an eye on Ethel while I am away." "Oh yes," said Bernard, "I may be running up to town for a few days and she could come too." "You are too kind," said Mr. Salteena, "and I don't think you will find her any trouble." "No, I don't think I shall," said Bernard. "She is a pretty girl, cheerful and active." And he blushed rather red. PG 45, Chapter 5, The Crystal Palace. Go to table of contents. About 9 o'clock next morning Mr. Salteena stood bag in hand in the ancestral hall waiting for the vehicle to convey him to the station. Bernard Clark and Ethel were seated side by side on a costly sofa gazing abstractly at the parting guest. Horace had dashed off to put on his cocked hat as he was going in the barouche, but Francis Minute was roaming about the hall well prepared for any deed. "Well," said Bernard, puffing at his meerschaum pipe, "I hope you will get on, Alf. I am sure you have that little letter to old Clincher." "May indeed I have," said Mr. Salteena. "Many thanks for the same, and I do hope Ethel will behave properly." PG 46, "Oh yes, I expect she will," said Bernard with a sigh. "I always do," said Ethel in a snappy tone. Just then there was a great clatter outside and the sound of hoofs and a loud neigh. "The barouche, I take it," said Bernard, rising slowly. "Quite correct, sir," said Minute, flinging wide the portals. "Well, goodbye, Alf, old man," said Bernard Clark. "Good luck and God bless you," he added in a pious tone. "Not at all," said Mr. Salteena. "I have enjoyed my stop, which has been short and sweet." "Well, goodbye, Ethel, my child," he said as bag in hand he proceeded to the door. Francis Minute bowed low and handed a small parcel to Mr. Salteena. "A few sunwise for the journey, sir," he remarked. "Oh, this is most kind," said Mr. Salteena. Minute closed his eyes with a tired smile. "Not kind, sir," he muttered, "quite usual." "Oh really," said Mr. Salteena, feeling rather PG 47, flabbergasted. "Well, goodbye, my good fellow," and he slipped 2/6 into the butler's open palm. Mr. Salteena had to travel first class as active Horace ran on to buy the ticket, which he presented with a low bow, the Times and Titbits. "Oh, many thanks, my man," said Mr. Salteena in a most airy voice. "Now will you find me a corner seat in the train, eh?" "If there is one, sir," replied Horace. In got Mr. Salteena to his first-class carriage, surrounded by his luggage carefully piled up by kindly Horace. The other passengers looked full of envy at the curly white wig and green plush uniform of Horace. Mr. Salteena crossed his legs in a lordly way and flung a fur rug over his knees, though he was hot enough in all conscience. He began to feel this was the thin end of the partition, and he smiled as he gently tapped the letter in his coat tail pocket. When Mr. Salteena arrived in PG 48, London, he began to stroll up the principal streets, thinking how gay all was. Presently he beheld a restaurant with a big menu outside, and he went boldly in. It was a sumptuous spot, all done up in gold with plenty of looking glasses. Many handsome ladies and gentlemen were already partaking of choice food and rich wines and whiskey, and the scene was most lively. Mr. Salteena had a little whiskey to make him feel more at home. Then he eat some curry to the tune of a merry valse on the band. He beat time to the music and smiled kindly at the waiters, and he felt very excited inside. "I am seeing life with a vengeance," he muttered to himself as he paid his bill at the desk. Outside, Mr. Salteena found a tall policeman. "Could you direct me to the Crystal Palace if you please?" said Mr. Salteena nervously. "Well," said the genial policeman, "my advice would be to take a cab, sir." "PG 49, oh would it?" said Mr. Salteena. "Then I will do so." He hailed a hansom and got speedily into the Crystal Palace. He cried gaily, and holding his bag on his knees he prepared to enjoy the sights of the metropolis. It was a merry drive, and all too soon the palace heaved in view. Mr. Salteena sprang out and paid the man, and then he entered the wondrous edifice. His heart beat very fast as two huge men in gold braid flung open the doors. Inside was a lovely fountain in the middle, and all round were little stalls where you could buy sweets and lemonade, also scent handkerchiefs and many dainty articles. There were a lot of people, but nobody very notable. At last, after buying 2 bottles of scent and some rather nice sweets which stuck to his teeth, Mr. Salteena beheld a wooden door on which was nailed a notice saying "To the private compartments." "Aha," said Mr. Salteena to himself, "this is PG 50, evidently my next move," and he gently pushed open the door, straightening his top hat as he did so. Inside he found himself in a dimly lit passage with a thick and handsome carpet. Mr. Salteena gazed round and beheld in the gloom a very superior gentleman in full evening dress, who was reading a newspaper and warming his hands on the hot water pipes. Mr. Salteena advanced on tiptoe and coughed gently, as so far the gentleman had paid no attention. However, at the second cough he raised his eyes in a weary fashion. "Do you want anything?" he asked in a most noble voice. Mr. Salteena got very flustered. "Well, I am seeking the Earl of Clincham," he began in a trembly voice. "Are you by any chance him?" he added most respectfully. "No, not exactly," replied the other. "My name happens to be Edward Procurio. I am half Italian, and I am the groom of the chambers." PG 51, "What chambers?" asked Mr. Salteena, blinking his eyes. "These," said Edward Procurio, waving a thin arm. Mr. Salteena then noticed several red doors with names of people on each one. "Oh, I see," he said. "Then perhaps you can tell me where the Earl of Clincham is to be found." "At the end of the passage, 4th door down," said Procurio tritely. "Of course he may be out, one never knows what they are up to." "I suppose not," said Mr. Salteena in an interested tone. "One cannot gamble on anything really," said Procurio, returning to the hot water pipes, "though of course I know a lot more than most people about the inmates here." "What are the habits of the Earl of Clincham?" said Mr. Salteena. Procurio gave a smile. "Many and various," he replied. "I can't say much in my position, PG 52, but one lives and learns." He heaved a sigh and shrugged his shoulders. "Well, good day," said Mr. Salteena, feeling better for the chat. Procurio nodded in silence as Mr. Salteena trotted off down the passage. At last he came to a door labelled Clincham Earl of in big letters. With a beating heart Mr. Salteena pulled the bell and the door swung open of its own accord. At the same moment a cheery voice rang out from the distance. "Come in please, I am in the study, first door on left." With a nervous bound Mr. Salteena obeyed these directions and found himself in a small but handsome compartment done in dark green lithia with crests on the chairs. Over the mantelpiece was hung the painting of a lady in a low neck looking quite the thing. By the desk was seated a tall man of 35 with very nice eyes of a twinkly nature and curly hair. He wore a quite plain suit of palest grey but well, PG 53, made, and on the table reposed a grey top hat which had evidently been on his head recently. He had a rose in his buttonhole, also a signet ring. "Hello," said this pleasant fellow as Mr. Salteena was spellbound on mat. "Hello, your lordship," responded our hero, bowing low and dropping his top hat. "Do I address the Earl of Clincham?" "You do," said the Earl with a homely smile. "And who do I address, eh?" Our hero bowed again. "Alfred Salteena," he said in deep tones. "Oh, I see," said the kindly Earl. "Well, come in, my man, and tell me who you are." Mr. Salteena seated himself gingerly on the edge of a crested chair. "To tell you the truth, my lord, I am not anyone of import, and I am not a gentleman, as they say," he ended, getting very red and hot. "Have some whiskey," said Lord Clincham, and he poured the liquid into a glass at his PG 54 elbow. Mr. Salteena lapped it up thankfully. "Well, my man," said the good-natured Earl, "what I say is, what does it matter? We can't all be of the blood royal, can we?" "No," said Mr. Salteena, "but I suppose you are." Lord Clincham waved a careless hand. "A small portion flows in my veins," he said, "but it does not worry me at all, and after all," he added piously, "at the day of judgment what will be the odds?" Mr. Salteena heaved a sigh. "I was thinking of this world," he said. "Oh, I see," said the Earl, "but my own idea is that these things are as piffle before the wind." "Not being an earl, I can't say," answered our hero, "but may I beg you to read this letter, my lord?" He produced Bernard's note from his coat tails. The Earl of Clincham took it in his long fingers. This is what he read. PG 55. My dear Clincham, the bearer of this letter is an old friend of mine, not quite the right side of the blanket, as they say. In fact, he is the son of a first-rate butcher, but his mother was a decent family called Hyssops of the Glen, so you see he is not so bad and is desirous of being the correct article. Could you rub him up a bit in society ways? I don't know much details about him, but no doubt he will supply all you need. I am keeping well and hope you are. I must run up to the compartments one day and look you up. Yours as ever, your faithful friend Bernard Clark. The Earl gave a slight cough and gazed at Mr. Salteena doubtfully. Have you much money, he asked, and are you prepared to spend a good deal? Oh yes, quite, gasped Mr. Salteena. I have plenty in the bank and £10 in ready gold in my purse. PG 56. You see, these compartments are the haunts of the aristocracy, said the Earl, and they are kept going by people who have got something funny in their family and who want to be less mere, if you can comprehend. Indeed I can, said Mr. Salteena. Personally I am a bit partial to mere people, said his lordship, but the point is that we charge a goodly sum for our training here, but however if you can't pay you need not join. I can and will, proclaimed Mr. Salteena, and he placed a £10 note on the desk. His lordship slipped it in his trouser pocket. It will be £42 before I have done with you, he said, but you can pay me here and there as convenient. Oh, thank you, cried Mr. Salteena. Not at all, said the Earl, and now to business. While here you will live in compartments in the basement known as lower range. You will get many hints from the groom of the chambers as to clothes and PG 57, etiquette to menials. You will mix with me for grammar, and I might take you out hunting or shooting sometimes to give you a few tips. Also I have lots of ladies' parties which you will attend occasionally. Mr. Salteena's eyes flashed with excitement. I shall enjoy that, he cried. His lordship coughed loudly. You may not marry while under instruction, he said firmly. Oh, I shall not need to, thank you, said Mr. Salteena. You must also decide on a profession, said his lordship, as your instruction will vary according. Could I be anything at Buckingham Palace, said Mr. Salteena with flashing eyes. Oh well, I don't quite know, said the noble Earl, but you might perhaps gallop beside the royal barouche if you care to try. Oh indeed I should, cried Mr. Salteena, I am very fond of fresh air and royalties. Well, said the Earl with a knowing smile, PG 58, I might arrange it with the Prince of Wales, who I am rather intimate with. Not really, gasped Mr. Salteena. Dear me, yes, remarked the Earl carelessly, and if we decide for you to gallop by the royal vehicle you must be measured for some plush knickerbockers at once. Mr. Salteena glanced at his rather fat legs and sighed. Well, I must go out now and call on a few dowagers, said his lordship, picking up his elegant top hat. Well, au revoir, he added with a good French accent. Adieu, my lord, cried Mr. Salteena, not to be outdone. We meet anon, I take it. Not till tomorrow, answered the Earl. You will now proceed to the lower regions, where you will no doubt find tea. He nodded kindly and glided out in silence. Here I will end my chapter. PG 59, Chapter 6, High Life. Go to table of contents. Mr. Salteena awoke next morning in his small but pleasant room. It was done in green and white with monograms on the toilette set. He had a tiny white bed with a green quilt and a picture of the Nativity and one of Windsor Castle on the walls. The sun was shining over all these things as Mr. Salteena opened his sleepy eyes. Just then there was rat-tat on the door. Come in, called Mr. Salteena, and in came Edward Procurio, balancing a tray very cleverly. He looked most elegant with his shiny black hair and pale yellow face and half-shut eyes. He smiled in a very mysterious and superior way as he placed the tray on Mr. Salteena's pointed knees. Your early beverage, he announced, and PG 60 began to pull up the blinds, still smiling to himself. Oh, thank you, cried Mr. Salteena, feeling very touzled compared to this grand fellow. Then to his great surprise Procurio began to open the wardrobe and look at Mr. Salteena's suits, making Italian exclamations under his breath. Mr. Salteena dare not say a word, so he swallowed his tea and ate a Marie biscuit hastily. Presently Procurio advanced to the bed with a bright blue serge suit. "Will you wear this today, sir?" he asked quietly. "Oh, certainly," said Mr. Salteena. "And a clean shirt would not come amiss," said Procurio. "What about this pale blue and white stripe?" "With pleasure," replied Mr. Salteena. So Procurio laid them out in neat array, also a razor and brush for shaving. Then he opened a door, saying, "This is the bathroom. Shall I turn on hot or cold?" PG 61. "I don't mind," said Mr. Salteena, feeling very hot and ignorant. "It is best for you to decide, sir," said Procurio firmly. "Well, I will try cold," said Mr. Salteena, feeling it was more manly to say that. Procurio bowed and beat a retreat to the bathroom. Then he returned and told Mr. Salteena that when he was washed he would find his breakfast in the sitting room. When Mr. Salteena was dressed in his best blue suit and clean shirt, he strolled into the sitting room, where a gay canary was singing fit to burst in the window and a couple of doves cooing in a wicker cage. A cheery smell greeted him as Procurio glided in with some steaming coffee. Mr. Salteena felt more at home and passed a few remarks about the weather. Procurio smiled and uncovered some lovely kidneys on toast, and as he did so bent and whispered in Mr. Salteena's ear, "You could have come in your dressing gown." PG 62. Mr. Salteena gave a start. "Oh, can I?" he said. 10,000 thanks." Then Procurio passed out and Mr. Salteena finished his kidneys and chirruped to the birds and had a cigarette from a handsome purple box which he found on the desk. Then Procurio entered once more and with a bow said, "His lordship is going to a levee this morning and thinks it might amuse you to go to. Could you be ready by 11 o'clock? "Oh yes, what fun," said Mr. Salteena. "Have you any notion what a levee is, my man?" Procurio gave a superior smile. "It is a party given by the Queen to very superior people, but this one is given by the Prince of Wales, as the Queen is not quite her usual self today. It will be at Buckingham Palace, so you will drive with his lordship." Mr. Salteena was fearfully excited. "What shall I wear?" he gasped. "Well, of course you ought to have black satin knickerbockers and a hat with white, PG 63, feathers, also garters and a star or two." "You surprise me," said Mr. Salteena. "I have none of those articles." "Well," said Procurio kindly, "his lordship will lend you his second best cocked hat, as you are obliged to wear one, and I think with a little thought I might rig you up so as to pass muster." Then they rummaged among Mr. Salteena's things, and Procurio got very intelligent and advised Mr. Salteena to wear his black evening suit and roll up his trousers. He also lent him a pair of white silk stockings which he fastened tightly round his knees with red rosettes. Then he quickly cut out a star in silver paper and pinned it to his chest, and also added a strip of red ribbon across his shirt front. Then Mr. Salteena surveyed himself in the glass. "Is it a fancy dress party?" he asked. No, they always were that kind of thing, but wait till you see his lordship. If you are ready, sir, I will conduct you in. PG 64. Mr. Salteena followed Procurio up countless stairs till they came to the Earl's compartments and tapped on the bedroom door. "Come in," cried a merry voice, and in they strode. "I have done my best with Mr. Salteena, my lord. I trust he will do. The hat, of course, will make a deal of difference." Mr. Salteena bowed nervously, wishing he had got correct knickerbockers, as his trousers did not feel too firm in spite of the garters. "Not half bad," cried the Earl. "Try on the hat, Salteena, it is on my bed." Mr. Salteena placed it on his head, and the feathers and gold braid became him very well, but he felt very jealous of the Earl, who looked a sight for the gods. He had proper satin knickerbockers with diamond clasps and buckled shoes and black silk stockings which showed up his long fine legs. He had a floppy shirt of softest muslin with real lace collar and cuffs. A sword hung at PG 65 his side, and a crimson sash was round his waist, and a splendid cocked hat on his head. His blue eyes twinkled as he pulled on a pair of white kid gloves. "Well, come on, Salteena," he cried, "and don't be nervous. I will get you a pair of knickers tomorrow." "Will you get a handsome Procurio?" Presently the Earl and Mr. Salteena were clattering away to Buckingham Palace. "You won't mind if I introduce you as Lord Hyssop's, do you?" said the Earl as he lit his pipe. "You see, you are sort of mixed up with the family, so it won't matter and will look better." "So it would," said Mr. Salteena. "What do we do at the levee?" "Oh, we stroll round and eat ices and champagne and that kind of thing, and sometimes there is a little music." "Is there any dancing?" asked Mr. Salteena. "Well, not always," said the Earl. "I am glad of that," said Mr. Salteena. "I am PG 66, not so nimble as I was, and my garters are a trifle tight." "Sometimes we talk about the laws and politics," said the Earl, "if Her Majesty is in that kind of a mood." Just then the splendid edifice appeared in view, and Mr. Salteena licked his dry lips at sight of the vast crowd. All round were carriages full of costly people, and outside the railings stood tall lifeguards keeping off the mere people who had gathered to watch the nobility clatter up. Lord Clincham began to bow right and left, raising his cocked hat to his friends. There was a lot of laughter and friendly words as the cab finally drew up at the front door. Two tall lifeguards whisked open the doors, and one of them kindly tipped the cabman. Mr. Salteena followed his lordship up the grand steps, trying to feel as homely as he could. Then a splendid-looking fellow in a red tunic and a sort of black velvet tam, PG 67, chanter, stepped forward from the throng, shouting, "What name, please?" "The Earl of Clincham and Lord Hyssop's," calmly replied the Earl, gently nudging Mr. Salteena to act up. Mr. Salteena nodded and blinked at the menial as much as to say all is well, and then he and the Earl hung up their cocked hats on two pegs. "This way," cried a deep voice, and another menial appeared wearing stiff white breeches, top boots, and a green velvet coat with a leather belt, also a very shiny top hat. They followed this fellow down countless corridors and finally came to big folding doors. The Earl twiddled his moustache and slapped his leg with his white glove as calmly as could be. Mr. Salteena perspired rather hard and gave a hitch to his garters to make sure. Then the portals divided and their names were shouted in chorus by countless domestics. The sumptuous room was packed with men of a noble nature dressed like the Earl in satin knickerbockers etc. and with pg 68 ladies of every hue with long trains and jewels by the dozen. You could hardly move in the gay throng. Dukes were as naught as there were a good lot of princes and archdukes, as it was a very superior levy indeed. The Earl and Mr. Salteena struggled through the crowd till they came to a platform draped with white velvet. Here on a golden chair was seated the Prince of Wales in a lovely ermine cloak and a small but costly crown. He was chatting quite genially with some of the crowd. Up clambered the Earl, followed at top speed by Mr. Salteena. "Hullo, Clincham," cried the Prince, quite homely and not at all grand. "So glad you turned up. Quite a squash, eh?" "A bit overpowering, your Highness," said the Earl, who was quite used to all this. "May I introduce my friend Lord Hyssops? He is staying with me, so I thought I would bring him along if you don't mind, Prince." "Not at all," cried the genial Prince, looking pg 69 rather surprised. Mr. Salteena bowed so low he nearly fell off the platform, and as the Prince put out a hand Mr. Salteena thought he had better kiss it. The Prince smiled kindly. "I am pleased to see you, Lord Hyssops," he said in a regal voice. Then the Earl chipped in. "And how is the dear Queen?" he said reverently. "Not up to much," said His Highness. "She feels the heat, poor soul," and he waved to a placard which said in large letters, "The Queen is indisposed." Presently His Highness rose. "I think I will have a quiet glass of champagne," he said. "You come too, Clincham, and bring your friend. The diplomats are arriving and I am not much in the mood for deep talk. I have already signed a dozen documents, so I have done my duty." They all went out by a private door and found themselves in a smaller but gorgeous room. The Prince tapped on the table and instantly two menials in red tunics appeared. "pg 70, bring 3 glasses of champagne," commanded the Prince, "and some ices," he added majestically. The goods appeared as if by magic, and the Prince drew out a cigar case and passed it round. "One grows weary of court life," he remarked. "Ah yes," agreed the Earl. "It upsets me," said the Prince, lapping up his strawberry ice. "All I want is peace and quiet and a little fun, and here I am tied down to this life," he said, taking off his crown. "Being royal has many painful drawbacks." "True," mused the Earl. Silence fell and the strains of the band could be heard from the next room. Suddenly the Prince gazed at Mr. Salteena. "Who did you say you were?" he asked in a puzzled tone. "Lord Hyssops," responded our hero, growing purple at the lie. "Well, you are not a bit like the Lord, pg 71, Hyssops." "I know," replied the Prince. "Could you explain matters?" Mr. Salteena gazed helplessly at the Earl, who had grown very pale and seemed lost for the moment. However, he quickly recovered. "He is quite all right really, Prince," he said. "His mother was called Miss Hyssops of the Glen." "Indeed," said His Royal Highness, "that sounds correct, but who was your father, eh?" Then Mr. Salteena thought he would not tell a lie, so in trembly tones he muttered, "My poor father was but a butcher, your highness, a very honest one I may add, and passing rich. He was called Dominic Salteena, and my name is Alfred Salteena." The prince stroked his yellow beard and rather admired Mr. Salteena for his truthful utterance. "Oh, I see," he said. "Well, why did you palm off on my menials as Lord Hyssop say?" Mr. Salteena wiped his sweating brow, but PG 72, the Earl came to the rescue nobly. "My fault entirely, Prince," he chimed in. "As I was bringing him to this very superior levy, I thought it would be better to say he was of noble birth. Have I offended your royal dignity?" "Not much," said the prince. "It was a laudable notion, and perhaps I will ask Mr. Salteena to one of my big balls some day." "Oh, your highness," gasped our hero, falling on one knee, "that would indeed be a treat." "I suppose, Prince, you have not got a job going at this palace for my friend?" asked the Earl. "You see, I am rubbing him up in society ways, and he fancies court life as a profession." "Oh, does he?" said the prince, blinking his eyes. "Well, I might see. I suggested if there was a vacancy going he might try cantering after the royal barouche," said the Earl. "So he might," said the prince. "I will speak, PG 73, to the Prime Minister about it and let you know." "10,000 thanks," cried Mr. Salteena, bowing low. "Well, now I must get along back to the levee," announced the prince, putting on his crown. "I have booked a valse with the Archduchess of Greenwich, and this is her favorite tune." So saying, they issued back to the big room where the nobility were whirling gaily round. The more serious people, such as the Prime Minister and the admirals etc., were eating ices and talking passionately about the laws in a low undertone. The Earl was soon mingling gaily in a set of lancers, but Mr. Salteena dare not because of his trousers. However, he sat on a velvet chair and quite enjoyed overhearing the intelligent conversation of the Prime Minister. And now we will leave our hero enjoying his glimpse of high life and return to Ethel Montague. PG 74, Chapter 7, Bernard's Idea. Go to table of contents. After Mr. Salteena had departed, Bernard Clark thought he would show Ethel over his house, so they spent a merry morning so doing. Ethel passed bright remarks on all the rooms, and Bernard thought she was most pretty, and Ethel began to be a bit excited. After a lovely lunch they sat in the gloomy hall, and Ethel began to feel very glad Mr. Salteena was not there. Suddenly Bernard lit his pipe. "I was thinking," he said passionately, "what about going up to London for a week's gaiety?" "Who?" inquired Ethel in a low tone. "You and me," said Bernard. "I know of several splendid hotels, and we could go to theatres and parties and enjoy ourselves to the full." PG 75, "So we could." "What an idea!" cried Ethel. So the merry plan was all arranged, and they spent the afternoon in packing their trunks. Next day they were already in the hall when the handsome vehicle once more clattered up. Ethel had on her blue velvet get-up and a sweet new hat and plenty of rouge on her face, and looked quite a seemly counterpart for Bernard, who was arrayed in a white and shiny mackintosh, top boots, and a well-brushed top hat tied onto him with a bit of black elastic. "Well, goodbye, Minute," he cried to the sombre butler. "Take care of your gout and the silver, and I will pay your wages when I come back." "Thank you kindly, sir," murmured Minute. "When may I expect your return?" "Oh well, I will wire," he said, and dashed down the steps. Ethel followed with small ladylike steps, having bowed politely to Minute, who closed his eyes in acknowledgment of her kindness. PG 76. The sun was shining and Ethel had the feeling of going to a very jolly party and felt so sorry for all the passers-by who were not going to London with Bernard. Arrived in the gay city, Bernard hailed a ebe to the manor born and got in, followed by Ethel. "Kindly drive us to the Gaiety Hotel," he cried in a firm tone. The cabman waved his whip and off they dashed. "We shall be highly comfortable and select at the Gaiety," said Bernard, and he thought to himself how lovely it would be if he was married to Ethel. He blushed a deep shade at his own thoughts and gave a sidelong glance at Ethel, who was gazing out of the window. "Well, one never knows," he murmured to himself, and as one of the poets says, "great events from trivial causes springs." Just then they stopped at the gay hotel and Ethel was spellbound at the size of the big hall. Bernard poked his head into the window of the paid desk. "Have you a couple, PG 77, of bedrooms for self and young lady?" he enquired in a lordly way. A very handsome lady with golden hair and a lace apron glanced at a book and hastily replied, "Oh yes sir, 2 beauties on the first floor, number 9 and 10. "Thank you," said Bernard, "we will go up if you have no objection." "None whatever, sir," said the genial lady. "The beds are well aired and the view is quite pleasant." "Come along, Ethel," cried Bernard. "This sounds all right, eh?" "Oh, quite," said Ethel with a beaming smile. They went upstairs and entered number 9, very fine compartment with a large downy bed and white doors with glass handles leading into number 10, an equally dainty room but a trifle smaller. "Which will you have, Ethel?" asked Bernard. "Oh well, I would rather you settled it, PG 78, said Ethel. "I am willing to abide by your choice." "The best shall be yours then," said Bernard, bowing gallantly and pointing to the biggest room. Ethel blushed at his speaking look. "I shall be quite lost in that huge bed," she added to hide her embarrassment. "Yes, I expect you will," said Bernard. "And now what about a little table d'hôte followed by a theatre?" "Oh yes," cried Ethel, and downstairs they went. PG 79, Chapter 8 Gay Call, Go to Table of Contents. "I tell you what, Ethel," said Bernard Clark about a week later, "we might go and pay a call on my pal the Earl of Clincham." "Oh do let's," cried Ethel, who was game for any new adventure. "I would dearly love to meet his lordship." Bernard gave a frown of hilarity at her rather mere words. "Well, dress in your best," he muttered. Ethel skipped into her bedroom and arrayed herself in a grass-green muslin of decent cut, a lace scarf, long fawn-colored kid gloves and a muslin hat to correspond. She carried a parasol in one hand, also a green silk bag containing a few stray hairpins, a clean handkerchief, 5 shillings, and a pot of gin case. She looked a dainty vision, PG 80, with her fair hair waving in the breeze, and Bernard bit his lips rather hard, for he could hardly contain himself and felt he must marry Ethel soon. He looked a handsome sight himself in some exquisite white trousers with a silk shirt and a pale blue blazer belt and cap. He wore this in honor of the Earl, who had been to Cambridge in his youth, and so had Bernard Clark. At last they found themselves in the entrance hall of the Crystal Palace and speedily made their way to the private compartments. Edward Procurio was walking up and down the passage looking dark and mysterious as usual. "Is his lordship at home?" cried Bernard Clark cheerily. "Which one?" asked Procurio. "Many lords live here," he said scornfully. "Well, I mean the Earl of Clincham," said Bernard. "Oh yes, he is in," responded Procurio, "and to the best of my belief giving a party." PG 81, "Indeed," ejaculated Bernard, "we have come in the nick of time." "Ethel," he added. "Yes," said Ethel in an excited tone. Then they pealed on the bell and the door flew open. Sounds of laughter and comic songs issued from the abode, and in a second they were in the crowded drawing room. It was packed with all the elite, and a stout duchess with a good-natured face was singing a lively song and causing much merriment. The Earl strode forward at sight of two newcomers. "Hello, Bernard, old boy," he cried, "this is a pleasure. And who have you got with you?" he added, glancing at Ethel. "Oh, this is Miss Montague," said Bernard. "Shall I introduce you?" "If you will be so good," said the Earl in an affable tone, and Bernard hastily performed the rite. Ethel began a bright conversation while Bernard strolled off to see if he could find any friends amid the throng. PG 82, "What pleasant compartments you have!" cried Ethel in rather a society tone. "Fairly so," responded the Earl. "Do you leary in London?" he added in a loud tone as someone was playing a very difficult pace on the piano. "Well, no, I don't," said Ethel. "My home is really in Northumberland, but I am at present stopping with Mr. Clark at the Gaiety Hotel," she continued in a somewhat showing-off tone. "Oh, I see," said the Earl. "Well, shall I introduce you to a few of my friends?" Please do," said Ethel with a dainty blow at her nose. The Earl disappeared into the madding crowd and presently came back with a middle-aged gentleman. "This is Lord Hyssops," he said. "My friend Miss Montague," he added genially. Ethel turned a dull yellow. "Lord Hyssops," she said in a faint voice. "Why, it is Mr. Salteena. I know him well." PG 83, "Hush," cried the Earl. "It is a title bestowed recently by my friend the Prince of Wales." "Yes, indeed," murmured Mr. Salteena, deeply flabbergasted by the ready wit of the Earl. "Oh, indeed," said Ethel in a peevish tone. "Well, how do you come to be here?" "I am stopping with his lordship," said Mr. Salteena, "and have a set of compartments in the basement, so there." "I don't care," said huffy Ethel. "I am in handsome rooms at the Gaiety." "Nothing could be nicer, I am sure," struck in the Earl. "What do you say, Hyssops?" "Doubtless it is charming," said Mr. Salteena, who was wanting peace. "Tell me, Ethel, how did you leave Bernard?" "I have not left him," said Ethel in an annoying voice. "I am stopping with him at the Gaiety, and we have been to lots of theatres and dances." "Well, I am glad you are enjoying yourself," said Mr. Salteena kindly. "You had been looking pale of late." PG 84, "No wonder in your stuffy domain," cried Ethel. "Well, have you got any more friends?" she added, turning to the Earl. "Well, I will see," said the obliging Earl, and he once more disappeared. "I don't know why you should turn against me, Ethel," said Mr. Salteena in a low tone. Ethel patted her hair and looked very sneery. "Well, I call it very mysterious you going off and getting a title," said Ethel, "and I think our friendship had better stop, as no doubt you will soon be marrying a duchess or something." "Not at all," said Mr. Salteena. "You must know, Ethel," he said, blushing a deep red, "I always wished to marry you some fine day." "This is news to me," cried Ethel, still peevish. "But not to me," murmured Mr. Salteena, and his voice trembled in his chest. "I may add that I have always loved you, and now I seem to do so madly," he added passionately. PG 85. "But I don't love you," responded Ethel. "But if you married me you might get to," said Mr. Salteena. "I think not," replied Ethel, "and all the same it is very kind of you to ask me," and she smiled more nicely at him. "This is agony," cried Mr. Salteena, clutching hold of a table. "My life will be sour grapes and ashes without you." "Be a man," said Ethel in a gentle whisper, "and I shall always think of you in a warm manner." "Well, half a loaf is better than no bread," responded Mr. Salteena in a gloomy voice, and just then the Earl reappeared with a very brisk lady in a tight silk dress whose name was called Lady Gay Finchling, and her husband was a general but had been dead a few years. "So this is Miss Montague," she began in a rather high voice. "Oh yes," said Ethel, and Mr. Salteena wiped the foaming dew from his forehead. Little did Lady PG 86 Gay Finchling guess she had just disturbed a proposal of marriage. The Earl chimed into the conversation now and again, and Lady Gay Finchling told several rather witty stories to enliven the party. Then Bernard Clark came up and said they had better be going. "Well, goodbye, Clincham," he said. "I must say I have enjoyed this party most. Rechauffé I call it, don't you, Ethel?" "Most," cried Ethel. "I suppose you often come," she added in a tone of envy to Lady Gay Finchling. "Pretty often," said Lady G.F. "Well, goodbye, as I see you are in a hurry to be off," and she dashed off towards the refreshment place. "Goodbye, Ethel," said poor Mr. Salteena in a spasm, and he seized hold of her hand. "You will one day rue your wicked words. Farewell," he repeated emphatically. "Oh well, goodbye," said Ethel in a vague tone, and then turning to the Earl she said, "PG 87, I have enjoyed myself very much, thank you." "Please don't mention it," cried the Earl. "Well, goodbye, Bernard," he added. "I shall look you up some day at your hotel." "Yes, do," muttered Bernard. "Always welcome, Clincham, old boy," he added, placing his blue cricket cap on his head, and so saying he and Ethel left the gay scene and once more oozed forth into the streets of London. PG 88. Chapter 9 AM Proposal. Go to table of contents. Next morning, while imbibing his morning tea beneath his pink silken quilt, Bernard decided he must marry Ethel with no more delay. "I love the girl," he said to himself, "and she must be mine, but I somehow feel I cannot propose in London. It would not be seemly in the city of London. We must go for a day in the country, and when surrounded by the gay twittering of the birds and the smell of the cows, I will lay my suit at her feet." And he waved his arm wildly at the gay thought. Then he sprang from bed and gave a rat-tat at Ethel's door. "Are you up, my dear?" he called. "Well, not quite," said Ethel hastily, jumping from her downy nest. "Be quick," cried Bernard. "I have a plan to PG 89 spend a day near Windsor Castle, and we will take our lunch and spend a happy day." "Oh hurrah!" shouted Ethel, "I shall soon be ready, as I had my bath last night, so won't wash very much now." "No, don't," said Bernard, and added in a rather fervent tone through the chink of the door, "You are fresher than the rose, my dear, no soap could make you fairer." Then he dashed off very embarrassed to dress. Ethel blushed and felt a bit excited as she heard the words, and she put on a new white muslin dress in a fit of high spirits. She looked very beautiful with some red roses in her hat, and the dainty red rouge in her cheeks looked quite the thing. Bernard heaved a sigh and his eyes flashed as he beheld her, and Ethel thought to herself what a fine type of manhood he represented, with his nice thin legs in pale brown trousers and well-fitting spats, and a red rose in his buttonhole, and rather a sporting cap which gave him a great air, PG-90, with its quaint check and little flaps to pull down if necessary. Off they started, the envy of all the waiters. They arrived at Windsor very hot from the journey, and Bernard at once hired a boat to row his beloved up the river. Ethel could not row, but she much enjoyed seeing the tough sunburnt arms of Bernard tugging at the oars as she lay among the rich cushion of the dainty boat. She had a rather lazy nature, but Bernard did not know of this. However, he soon got dog-tired and suggested lunch by the mossy bank. "Oh yes," said Ethel, quickly opening the sparkling champagne. "Don't spill any," cried Bernard as he carved some chicken. They ate and drank deeply of the charming viands, ending up with meringues and chocolates. "Let us now bask under the spreading trees," said Bernard in a passionate tone. "Oh yes, let's," said Ethel, and she opened her PG-91 dainty parasol and sank down upon the long green grass. She closed her eyes, but she was far from asleep. Bernard sat beside her in profound silence, gazing at her pink face and long wavy eyelashes. He puffed at his pipe for some moments while the larks gaily caroled in the blue sky. Then he edged a trifle closer to Ethel's form. "Ethel," he murmured in a trembly voice. "Oh, what is it?" said Ethel hastily, sitting up. "Words fail me," ejaculated Bernard hoarsely. "My passion for you is intense," he added fervently. "It has grown day and night since I first beheld you." "Oh," said Ethel in surprise, "I am not prepared for this," and she leant back against the trunk of the tree. Bernard placed one arm tightly round her. "When will you marry me, Ethel?" he uttered. "You must be my wife. It has come to that. I love you so intensely that if you say no, I shall perforce dash my body to the PG-92 brink of yon muddy river," he panted wildly. "Oh, don't do that," implored Ethel, breathing rather hard. "Then say you love me," he cried. "Oh, Bernard," she sighed fervently, "I certainly love you madly. You are to me like a heathen god," she cried, looking at his manly form and handsome flashing face. "I will indeed marry you." "How soon?" gasped Bernard, gazing at her intensely. "As soon as possible," said Ethel, gently closing her eyes. "My darling," whispered Bernard, and he seized her in his arms. "We will be married next week." "Oh, Bernard," muttered Ethel, "this is so sudden." "No, no," cried Bernard, and taking the bull by both horns he kissed her violently on her dainty face. "My bride-to-be," he murmured several times. PG-93 Ethel trembled with joy as she heard the mystic words. "Oh Bernard," she said, "little did I ever dream of such as this," and she suddenly fainted into his outstretched arms. "Oh, I say," gasped Bernard, and laying the dainty burden on the grass he dashed to the water's edge and got a cupful of the fragrant river to pour on his true love's pallid brow. She soon came to and looked up with a sickly smile. "Take me back to the Gaiety Hotel," she whispered faintly. "With pleasure, my darling," said Bernard. "I will just pack up our viands ere I unloose the boat." Ethel felt better after a few drops of champagne and began to tidy her hair while Bernard packed the remains of the food. Then arm in arm they tottered to the boat. "I trust you have not got an illness, my darling," murmured Bernard as he helped her in. PG 94. "Oh no, I am very strong," said Ethel. "I fainted from joy," she added to explain matters. "Oh, I see," said Bernard, handing her a cushion. "Well, some people do," he added kindly, and so saying they rowed down the dark stream now flowing silently beneath a golden moon. All was silent as the lovers glided home with joy in their hearts and radiance on their faces. Only the sound of the mysterious water lapping against the frail vessel broke the monotony of the night. So I will end my chapter. PG 95. Chapter 10. Preparing for the fray. Go to table of contents. The next few days were indeed busy for Ethel and Bernard. First of all, Ethel got some dainty pink note paper with silver crest on it and sent out invitations in the following terms to all their friends. "Miss Ethel Montague will be married to Mr. Bernard Clark at Westminster Abbey on the 10th of June. Your company is requested there at 2:30 sharp and afterwards for refreshment at the Gaiety Hotel. RSVP." Having posted heaps of these and got several replies, Ethel began to order her wedding dress, which cost a good bit. She chose a rich satin with a humped pattern of gold on the pure white, and it had a long train, PG 96, edged with arum lilies. Her veil was of pure lace with a crown of orange blossom. Her bouquet she ordered to be of white dog daisies, St. Joseph lilies, and orange blossoms tied up with pale blue satin ribbon. "You will indeed be a charming spectacle, my darling," gasped Bernard as they left the shop. Then they drove to the tailor, where Bernard ordered an elegant black suit with coat tails lined with crimson satin and a pale lavender tie and an opera hat of the same hue, and he intended to wear violets in his buttonholes, also his best white spats, diamond studs, and a few extras of costly air. They both ordered a lot of new clothes besides, and Bernard gave Ethel a very huge tiara made of rubies and diamonds, also 2 rich bracelets, and Ethel gave him a brand new trunk of shiny green leather. The Earl of Clincham sent a charming gift of some hem-stitched sheets edged with real lace and a photo of himself in a striking attitude. PG 97. Mr. Salteena sent Ethel a Bible with a few pious words of advice and regret, and he sent Bernard a very handy little camp stool. Ethel's parents were too poor to come so far, but her mother sent her a gold watch which did not go but had been some years in the family, and her father provided a cheque for £2 and promised to send her a darling little baby calf when ready. Then they ordered the most splendid refreshments. They had tea and coffee and sparkling wines to drink, also a lovely wedding cake of great height with a sugar angel at the top holding a sword made of almond paste. They had countless cakes besides, also ices, jelly, meringues, jam tarts with plenty of jam on each, some cold tongue, some ham with salad, and a pig's head done up in a wondrous manner. Ethel could hardly contain herself as she gazed at the sumptuous repast, and Bernard gave her a glass of rich wine while he imbibed some whiskey before going to bed. Ethel got speedily into her PG 98 bed for the last time at the dear old Gaiety, and shed a few salt tears thinking of her past life, but she quickly cheered up and began to plan about how many children she would have. "I hope I shall have a good lot," she vowed to herself, and so saying fell into repose. PG 99 Chapter 11 The Wedding. Go to table of contents. The abbey was indeed thronged next day when Ethel and Bernard cantered up in a very fine carriage drawn by two prancing steeds who foamed a good deal. In the porch stood several clean altar boys who conducted the lucky pair up the aisle while the organ pealed a merry blast. The mighty edifice was packed, and seated in the front row was the Earl of Clincham, looking very brisk as he was going to give Ethel away at the correct moment. Beside him sat Mr. Salteena, all in black and looking bitterly sad, and he ground his teeth as Ethel came marching up. There were some merry hymns, and as soon as Ethel and Bernard were won, the clergyman began a sermon about Adam and Eve and the serpent, and PG 100. Mr. Salteena cried into his large handkerchief, and the Earl kept on nudging him as his sniffs were rather loud. Then the wedding march pealed forth, and down the church stepped Ethel and Bernard as husband and wife. Into the cab they got and speedily dashed off to the Gaiety. The wedding refreshments were indeed a treat to all, and even Mr. Salteena cheered up when he beheld the wedding cake and sparkling wines. Then the Earl got up and made a very fine speech about marriage vows and bliss, and he quoted several good bits from the Bible which got a lot of applause. Bernard replied in good round terms. "I thank your lordship for those kind remarks," he said in clear tones. "I expect we shall be as happy as a lark, and I hope you will all be ditto some day." "Hear, hear," muttered a stray lady in the crowd, and down sat Bernard while Ethel went up to change her wedding garment for a choice pink velvet dress with a golden girdle and a very chic toque. Bernard, PG 101, also put on a new suit of blue stripe and some silk socks and clean underclothing. "Hurrah, hurrah," shouted the guests as the pair reappeared in the aforesaid get-ups. Then everybody got a bag of rice and sprinkled on the pair, and Mr. Salteena sadly threw a white tennis shoe at them, wiping his eyes the while. Off drove the happy pair, and the guests finished up the food. The happy pair went to Egypt for their honeymoon, as they thought it would be a nice warm spot and they had never seen the wondrous land. Ethel was a bit sick on the boat, but Bernard braved the storm in manly style. However, Ethel had recovered by the time they got to Egypt, and here we will leave them for a merry 6 weeks of bliss while we return to England. PG 102, Chapter 12 How it ended. Go to table of contents. Mr. Salteena, by the aid of the Earl and the kindness of the Prince of Wales, managed to get the job his soul craved, and any day might be seen in Hyde Park or Piccadilly galloping madly after the royal carriage in a smart suit of green velvet with knickerbockers complete. At first he was rather terrified as he was not used to riding, and he found his horse bumped him a good deal and he had to cling on desperately to its flowing mane. At other times the horse would stop dead and Mr. Salteena would use his spurs and bad language with no avail. But he soon got more used to his fresh and sultry steed and His Royal Highness seemed satisfied. The Earl continued his merry life at the PG 103 compartments till finally he fell in love with one of the noble ladies who haunted them. She was not so pretty as Ethel, as she had rather a bulgy figure and brown eyes, but she had lovely raven tresses, a pointed nose and a rose-like complexion of a dainty hue. She had very nice feet and plenty of money. Her name was called Lady Helena Herring and her age was 25 and she mated well with the Earl. Mr. Salteena grew very lonely after the Earl was married and he could not bear a single life any more, so failing Ethel he married one of the maids-in-waiting at Buckingham Palace by name Bessie Top, a pleasant girl of 18 with a round red face and rather starry eyes. So now that all our friends are married, I will add a few words about their families. Ethel and Bernard returned from their honeymoon with a son and heir, a nice fat baby called Ignatius Bernard. They soon, PG 104, had 6 more children, 4 boys and 3 girls, and some of them were twins, which was very exciting. The Earl only got 2 rather sickly girls called Helen and Marie because the last one looked slightly French. Mr. Salteena had a large family of 10, 5 of each, but he grew very morose as the years rolled by and his little cottage was very noisy and his wife was a bit annoying at times, especially when he took to dreaming of Ethel and wishing he could have married her. Still he was a pious man in his way and found relief in prayer. Bernard Clark was the happiest of our friends as he loved Ethel to the bitter end, and so did she him, and they had a nice house too. The Earl soon got tired of his sickly daughters and his wife had a savage temper, so he vowed he would divorce her and try again, but he gave up the idea after PG 105, several attempts, and decided to offer it up as a mortification. So now, my readers, we will say farewell to the characters in this book. The End by Daisy Ashford. ****** End of the Project Gutenberg ebook The Young Visitors, or Mr. Salteena's Plan ******. Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about Donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116. 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact. Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.